What's up, guys? Today we'll be discussing the second volume of the Crossed comic book series, known as Crossed Family Values. If you recall, the first Crossed series was written by Garth Ennis with art by Jason Burrows. Alright, so Ennis had no intention of making more Crossed content, but the publisher, Avatar Press, was very much interested in continuing to tell stories set in that universe. And so in the end, Ennis gave his blessing to Avatar to continue on with the one stipulation being that none of his characters from the original were to ever be used again in any form. Anyway, so Avatar commissioned writer David Lapham and artist Javier Barreno to create a new miniseries taking place in the Crossed universe, but completely separate from Ennis' work. But maybe I got a little ahead of myself. If you're unfamiliar with what the Crossed are or what that refers to, let me fill you in. Simply put, the Crossed are humans who have been infected by a mysterious virus transmitted via contaminated fluids. The virus leaves a rash on their face in the shape of a cross, and it completely shuts down all human inhibitions. The Crossed no longer have the capacity for morality or restraint. Their sole aim is to cause as much misery and suffering as possible. To that end, they engage in brutal murders, rape, torture, and cannibalism, all carried out in the most horrific ways thinkable. And none of what the Crossed do is left up to the imagination. It's all depicted unapologetically. For that reason, the Crossed series is kind of infamous where it's known, and Family Values here is even somewhat notorious among Crossed fans themselves. Now, I thought I would talk about the premise of Family Values before moving on to analysis, so if you don't want spoilers for the first half of this volume, go ahead and skip to the appropriate time in the video. Also, I will not show the rape and nudity on here, and it's possible I will have to censor other things later to get this video up on YouTube. Anyway, so our central character of Crossed Family Values is a young woman named Adeline Pratt. Adeline has just turned 18 and lives on her family's horse ranch in North Carolina. Speaking of her family, it's huge. Adeline has 5 brothers and 4 sisters. Good heavens. Good luck paying for college for all those kids. The main siblings you need to know here are the oldest ones named Joseph Jr. and Matthew, as well as Adeline's younger sisters, Hannah, who is 16, and Kayleen, who is probably like 10 to 12. I only mention their ages for reasons that will become apparent all too shortly. The patriarch of the Pratt clan is a man named Joseph. Joseph is extremely religious, but not in the typical church-going, family man, community leader type of way, more in the schizo, thinks he's talking to God, or is God type of way. In fact, he's a major POS who Adeline knows is actively raping at least one of her sisters. The mother is aware of this, by the way, but turns a blind eye to the situation, likely out of fear, as it's implied that she was likely also abused by her husband. So Adeline confronts her father for the first time, and Joseph responds by punching her in the face and telling her that they'll never have this conversation again. And there's not much time for much else to happen, as we find out that the Crossed outbreak has already begun as a massive mob of Crossed emerge from the woods surrounding the secluded Pratt Ranch. Chaos and violence ensues, and Adeline loses 3 of her younger siblings. But in the end, Joseph takes charge, and he leads them on horseback away from the calamity and danger. We cut to a year later, where we see Adeline meet up with her older brothers, Junior and Matthew. They have been on their own for the last 3 months doing advanced lookout for any Crossed. You see, Joseph adapted quickly to the apocalypse and led his family across the country to Montana, where he decided to build a new society for them and the various other survivors they picked up along the way. And now Adeline, Junior, and Matthew have returned, so it's a Pratt family reunion of sorts. And they all sit down to eat, but Adeline notices that her little sister Kayleen is missing. Her mother gives some vague excuse about her being busy, and then the father abruptly changes the subject. After the meal, Joseph takes his returning children to see a Crossed specimen he has captured in their absence. He is studying it and has drained fluids from it into jars. Adeline thinks this is a reckless project and lets Joseph know that she thinks there are too many Crossed out there to stay in one place and not be on the move. Her father disagrees and tells her that they're hidden, and that's why he needs Adeline and her brothers to leave again to make sure it stays that way. As Adeline gets ready to leave, she asks to see Kayleen again, to which Joseph replies that she's gone fetching water. On the way out, Adeline questions one of the pregnant survivors, who the father of her child is, and the answer she gets back is that it's God's child. 2 weeks later, Adeline is outside of Butte, observing through a set of binoculars a group of survivors foolishly sitting around a large open fire. She is uneasy and has been unable to shake the feeling that something is seriously wrong. She thinks about the nature of the crossed and how she is trying to anticipate their behavior and learn their patterns and plan around it, when she realizes that is essentially what Joseph has done with her. Her father didn't want her in the village. Her father had sent her out to get rid of her. So Adeline rushes back as quickly as possible and walks in on Joseph having sex with her sister, Hannah. Adeline justifiably freaks out and demands to know where Kayleen is. Joseph tells her there was an accident, and to prepare herself as he unlocks a building and lets her inside. It's Kayleen, tied up, crossed, and pregnant by her own father. It's truly a disgusting image. Before Adeline can shoot Joseph, though, he gets the upper hand on her and locks her in the cell where he had earlier kept that crossed specimen before it died. In the meantime, a group of crossed have killed the survivors in Butte and found the stuff Adeline hastily left behind. With that lead, they began tracking where she went. Back at the village, Adeline is visited by her mother, who informs her that Kayleen became infected when she tried to take her own life via the crossed her father was experimenting on. Adeline then berates her mom until she leaves. Not long after that, Joseph enters the cell and tells Adeline that cross were spotted nearby and are on their way. They get into a fight, and Joseph beats and rapes Adeline as the cross began overtaking the village. It's absolute chaos, and amid it, the mother returns to the cell and sees what Joseph has done to Adeline. She helps Adeline up and takes her out of the cell before locking herself in it with Joseph. The mother then pours one of the jars of cross fluid over herself, becoming infected. Locked in with no place to go, Joseph is stabbed through the face and neck, killed by his crossed wife. Outside, Adeline witnesses the devastation. The village is an inferno, burning down, and most of the people are being killed. She encounters a small band about to make a getaway on horses, and she says she'll join them in a second. She has one more thing she needs to do. Adeline opens the door to the building Kayleen was in and looks inside. Kayleen is still there, and she has given birth to a baby. A baby she is eating. Adeline puts her down and joins the survivors evacuating. And that is the first 3 issues of Crossed Family Values. There's 4 more, and trust me, plenty of fucked up shit happens there too. In any case, now I'll transition into my analysis and review portion. I feel like me even acknowledging that I've heard of this story is a liability. Whatever though, I guess. I suppose I'll talk about the art first, as I have comparatively less to say about it. I think the art style fits the Crossed style well. Javier Barreno's art is in line with Jason Burrow's original, at least as 2 different artists can be. I did notice that Barreno is pretty good at using reds in striking ways, if that makes sense. Sorry, I don't have the artistic vocabulary necessary to convey what I mean. Anyway, now I'll talk about the writing. Okay. So I found one interview where David Lapham discussed his thought process behind writing for Crossed. It's a horror book about the absolute worst aspects of human nature. It's supposed to be filled with uncompromising nastiness. To me, that's a challenge. Garth set the stage and the bar. My job, as I see it, is to take it as far as I can. It is not surprising that Lapham had that mindset. Family Values reads like Lapham was trying to fill all the gaps in depravity Ennis had excluded from the original. Namely, incest, pedophilia, and non-crossed sexual abuse, which Lapham includes all at the same time. These are all extremely uncomfortable themes. One almost cringes just saying or hearing those words. Unfortunately, though, they are aspects of the collective human experience. They are a dark side of humanity that people often choose to ignore when they can. This is all to say that there's a gulf between non-vague discussions about these types of crimes and their actual incidents in the real world. A gulf between art depicting all the aspects of humanity and the artistic void left by the pervasive silence toward detailing such darkness. I don't know if Crossed Family Values is the work that does or should bridge that gap, but it does represent a rare avenue through which one can critically grapple with these themes in a controlled manner. I don't think someone needs to see an artistic rendition of incest, pedophilia, or rape to understand that it's abhorrent. But I think all too often these things sort of exist as vague, fleeting impressions in people's minds until they or someone they know is affected by them. I think there is a kind of heavy taboo around them in a way something like murder doesn't. Right, I mean, murder is represented everywhere, from books to TV to movies, you name it. Something like incest, though, is very rarely depicted, and something like rape is only ever really implied. I worry that the average person does not understand what these kinds of things entail, what they truly mean, because it's a challenging thought, and people would prefer to avoid it. Yet that darkness exists. And I wonder if its absence in discourse contributes to its taboo nature, potentially perpetuating the shame and silence that allows it to continue on unabated. To get back to the interview, in talking about the next volume in the Cross series, Lapham gives an answer that further shines light on his Crossed works. The interviewer asks why Lapham chooses to introduce such despicable human villains in his Crossed stories. And that's a good question, because I don't know if you noticed, but the Cross themselves were kind of just incidental to the story, with the main villain being the controlling and abusive Joseph Pratt. Anyway, Lapham responds that the Crossed are the Crossed. Horrible, violent, primal. To me, the stories that seem compelling are how that affects the survivors, how this new environment brings out the best and worst in regular people. Yes, the Crossed are pure evil, but they're also animal and immediate. They don't plan your torture. They torture in the moment. A patient, calculated, thinking human is capable of much worse. It's an interesting response that harkens back to questions humans have been asking since the dawn of time. Was Moby Dick evil because it tore off Ahab's leg, killed men and sank boats? Or is it foolish and insane to project morality onto an animal? To project a special significance and intent onto something fundamentally incapable of having it? Who is more evil? Adolf Hitler, who gave the go-ahead to the mass extermination of Jews, but who himself never directly participated? Or someone like Ted Bundy, who personally murdered some 30-plus people? I suppose I'll let you decide. Likewise, I'll finish out the video by earnestly asking you, the viewer, am I putting too much thought into cross-family values here? Is it just shock value, or does it tap into something higher here? Even accidentally or imperfectly? Am I like Ahab, who saw embodied in the white whale fate and the forces of Cosmo itself? Am I too ascribing greater meaning to something that just doesn't have it? Like I said, it's ultimately up to you, I guess. And please do share your thoughts in the comments. In conclusion, would I recommend cross-family values? Practically, probably not. There's pretty much no way you could recommend this book to anyone you know without getting reported to the FBI. So despite all that I said, legally, the answer is no. Alright, this has gone on for long enough. If you are still here, thank you very much for watching. I don't think I will go as in-depth as I did here for other cross volumes, but if you are interested in this type of content, generally speaking, consider subscribing here and to my main channel. Thank you again. I hope you have a good one.